Let us look into this example that I have implemented. My desktop is in higher resolution mode, hence the fonts are looking smaller. Let me zoom it a bit so that the example is clearly visible. A third navigation link named employees is added to our Angular application. When I click on this link, we can see a list of employees displayed. For each employee in the list, the employee name, salary, and gender is displayed along with an edit link. The edit link can be used when there is a need to modify the specific employee information. Let me click on the edit link of John. After clicking edit, a new page with the heading Edit Employee is shown. In the new page, John's details are pre-populated in the form so that the details can be changed. I am going back to employees list using the link in the bottom. Now I am clicking edit link of James. The edit page is displayed again, but now details of James are pre-populated in the form fields. Let me go back to employee list page. There is a key difference in the way navigation works here. Clicking on edit navigates us to another component. Additionally, the edit page pre-populates the respective employee's information in the form. This is implemented using root parameter feature available in Angular. With this feature, we can pass data from one component to another. To demonstrate root parameter feature, a simpler example can be used, but it will be difficult to know where this feature can be applied. Hence, I am demonstrating this example even though it is long. In this video, I will show step by step on how to implement this example using root parameter. At the right intervals during this video, I will provide instructions to pause the video so that you can complete necessary coding along with me. The first step is to define the data type and data for storing the employee information in an organized way. A new folder named model is created, and in this folder a new file named employee.ts is created. In this file, an interface named employee is defined. This interface has four properties: ID, name, salary, and gender with the appropriate data type. The ID property helps to uniquely identify an employee. The inclusion of export keyword for interface makes it possible to use this interface in other TypeScript classes. This interface will be the data type for employee. Below the interface definition, I have defined a constant named employees of data type employee array. For this constant, some sample employee data as objects is included. This data is what will be displayed in the employee list screen. The constant is also prefixed with export keyword so that we can use this in the component class. In a real application, this data should come from a database. To avoid dependency on other technologies, the employee data is hard-coded in this constant. Let me summarize the steps done so far so that those steps can be implemented in your desktop. Create a new folder named model in src/app folder. In this folder, create a new file named employee.ts. The code snippet of this file is available in the description of this video. If required, you can copy and paste the code snippet from the description. Pause the video here to define the data for employee based on the instructions provided and then proceed ahead. From the example demonstrated, we know that two components needs to be created. One for employee list and other for editing an employee. I have already created both the components. In the folder, we can see that spec.ts file is not present for both the components. Components can be generated without test classes when using the --skip-tests option with value as true. These are the two commands to create the components. The component names are employee-list and edit-employee. For your convenience, these two commands are also available in the description. If required, you can make use of them. Pause the video here, execute these two commands in Visual Studio Code terminal to create the components and then proceed ahead. Now I will provide the instructions to define the routes and navigation links for the two components we just now created. In app-routing.module.ts, I have defined two new routes. The path employees is mapped to employee list component. The path edit-employee/:id is mapped to edit employee component. The /:id defines a parameter named id for the edit-employee route. The id here represents the id of the employee for whom the details needs to be edited. This is how the edit employee component is going to dynamically receive the selected employee. Here in the place of id, we can give any convenient name that we want. Now that we have defined the routes, let us define the navigation link in app.component.html. A new anchor tag is included after the attribute directive link for displaying the employees link. This is how the page should look like after clicking on the employees link. Pause the video here, include these routes in app-routing.module.ts, then include the navigation link in app.component.html. Check if the navigation link and component is displayed, then proceed ahead. The employees constant defined in employee.ts should be now made available in the employee list component. In employee-list.component.ts, a property named employee list is defined. It is of type employee array with value assigned as employee constant, which is imported from employee.ts. The inclusion of this property and its import now makes it possible to display the employee list in HTML template. Pause the video here to include the import and property definition. Once done, save the file and proceed ahead. Now we will make changes in HTML template to display the employee names in the list. In employee-list.component.html, heading is included. Following that, we have a div tag. This div tag is included to represent one employee. It has ng for directive which iterates through the employee list property and assigns each item to employee variable. This div tag will be repeated based on the number of items in the array. In the page layout for each employee, we can see a border and some spacing included. This styling is defined using the card class included in div tag. The styles for the card class is defined in employee-list.component.css. The first three styles of this class takes care of border and spacing. The next two properties help to display other employee data in a row. Within the main div tag, a child div tag is defined. This div tag contains the interpolation of employee name. This is what displays the employee name in the list. Here, employee comes from the variable defined in ng for directive and name represents the object property of the employee. Pause the video here, include the coding in both of these files to get this output, then proceed ahead. The salary is now displayed by including the div tag with interpolation for salary. But the salary is displayed very closely to the name. For each inner div, if we include some standard size width, then we can have some uniform spacing. This can be included by defining the width for each inner div. I am uncommenting the style definition in component CSS, which will include the spacing for each inner div. I am saving the file. Once the page reloads, we can see the spacing included between the name and salary. Pause the video here, include this div tag in HTML template, include this style definition in the component CSS, then check if the salary is displayed, then proceed ahead. Next, to display gender, I have included the next div tag with interpolation. In the interpolation, I have included an expression with the tertiary operator. Let me explain the reason why we have this tertiary operator. When we define the data for male, it is stored as M, and for female, it is stored as F. When displaying, it would look better if the gender is displayed as a full word. Hence, the conversion to full word is done using the tertiary operator. Pause the video here to include this div tag with the interpolation to display the gender and then proceed ahead. Now that we have displayed the employee data, the next step is to include the edit link. I have included the necessary coding to display the edit link, and in the page it is currently displayed. Let us have a closer look at the URL of each link. I am right-clicking on the edit link of John, copying the link address and pasting it in the notepad. Next, let me do the same thing by copying the link address for Sophia. I am pasting this link as well in the notepad. If we compare both the URLs, we can see the path name is edit-employee and ends with a slash and a number. This number represents the ID of the respective employee. For John it is 1 and for Sophia it is 3. Notice that we are able to dynamically generate this link to pass the employee ID in the URL. This is the router parameter that we are passing to edit employee component. Coming back to the HTML template code in Visual Studio Code. This is the line included in the HTML template to display this edit link. I will explain how this anchor tag works, but before that I would recommend you to pause the video here to include this anchor tag and examine the URL of 2 to 3 employees and proceed ahead. This is the anchor tag that dynamically includes the employee ID in the URL. In the bottom, I have opened app.component.html so that we can compare the differences in the routerLink syntax that we have used earlier. Earlier, we defined routerLink directive without square brackets, but now we are using it with square brackets. The next difference is in the value. Earlier, we directly provided the router path name, but now we have defined an array with 2 array items. Now we are using a different syntax of routerLink directive to dynamically pass the parameter value. In the value of routerLink, we are including an array of 2 items. The first item in the array represents the root path. This should be the path that we have defined in the roots. I have already selected the respective path for quicker reference. The second item in the array represents the router parameter value. We have to dynamically pass the employee ID, hence employee.id is included. Here, employee refers to the variable defined in ngFor that comes from employee list component property. The ID refers to the property in employee object. As we can see, the source of employee ID comes from the component. We are using property binding with square brackets for routerLink directive. This routerLink syntax makes it possible to create dynamic URL in the anchor tag. Also, notice that this URL pattern now matches with the root path that we have defined for edit employee component. Hope this clarifies how we can pass router parameter values using this alternative routerLink syntax. In the employee list page, when clicking on edit link, it displays the default HTML template of edit employee component. Let us now construct the HTML for edit employee component. I have edit-employee.component.html open. Let me clear the current paragraph tag. I am including the h1 tag with content as edit employee. This is for displaying the page heading. Then including the form tag. Within the form tag, I am including a div tag containing a label with content as name. This will be the label for the name field for an employee. After the div tag, I am including an input element of type text. I am saving the file. After the page reload, we can see the heading and input text element displayed for name with label. Pause the video here. In edit-employee.component.html, include the heading and name field, then proceed ahead. Now we will include the salary field. Let me copy the label and input tag for employee and paste it below. Then I am changing the label name from name to salary. Now we have included the salary field for employee. I am saving the file. After the page reload, we can see the salary field displayed with label. Pause the video here to include the salary field and then proceed ahead. Now we will include the gender field. I am copying the label tag of salary and pasting it below, then changing the label as gender. After the gender label, I am including an input element of type radio followed by text male. This will display the radio button for male. Then in the next line, I am including the radio button for female. Now we have included the field for gender. I am saving the file. After the page reload, we can see the gender label followed by 2 radio buttons. Pause the video here to include gender radio buttons and then proceed ahead. Now we will include the Save Submit button and a link to employee list page. I am including a div tag after gender. Within the div tag, I am including the input submit element with value as save. The div tag helps to display the submit button in a separate line. Then I am including the anchor tag with routerLink pointing to /employees with content as employee list. This anchor tag helps to navigate back to employee list. I am saving the file. After the page reload, we can see the save button and the link for employee list component. When clicking on the link, it navigates back to employee list. By clicking on an edit link, I am coming back to the edit employee component. Pause the video here to include the submit button and the link. Check if the save button is displayed. Also verify if the link works and then proceed ahead. Now we have completed the HTML layout for edit employee. We will now include an employee object in the component class as a property. This property can be linked with the form fields using two-way data binding. In edit-employee.component.ts, I am including a property named employee of type employee interface. I am selecting employee from the drop-down so that necessary import gets included. For the employee property, I am going to assign a temporary sample employee object. This object will help us to quickly verify if the two-way data binding is working or not. I am including assignment operator followed by the curly braces. Within the curly braces, including ID property with value as 1. Then including name property with value as John. Then including salary property with value as 2000. Then including gender property with value as M. I am saving the file. Pause the video here to define the employee property with some sample data and then proceed ahead. Now that we have defined the employee object, we will implement two-way data binding on the HTML template. In employee name input text, I am including ng model directive with square brackets and normal brackets. Then assigning the value of ng model directive as employee.name. Here, employee refers to the component property and name refers to the employee object property. Next, including two-way data binding for salary with value as employee.salary. I am copying and pasting the directive from name and then changing the property from name to salary. For gender, including the two-way data binding in both the radio buttons with value as employee.gender. I am pasting the ng model directive and changing the property as gender for both the radio buttons. Now we need to make the respective gender option button selected based on the value M or F. In the male radio button, I am including the value attribute with value as M. Similarly, for female radio button, I am including the value attribute with value as F. Now we have completed all the necessary two-way data binding. The values defined in the component property should reflect in the HTML template. I am saving the file. After the page reload, we don't see the form fields populated with appropriate values. Let us look into the console section of developer tools of the browser. We can see an error message displayed mentioning that if we use form tag, then the input element should be defined with name attribute. Since we have now included the form tag, the two-way data binding is not working. Let us get this corrected. I am going to include the name attribute for the first input element with value as name. Then including the name attribute for salary input field with value as salary. Then including the name attribute for the first radio button with value as gender. Then I am copying and pasting the name attribute for the second radio button as well. After these changes, I am saving the file. After the page reload, we can see the form fields populated with appropriate values. We can see that the male option selected in the radio button. Let us check how it works for female. In the component, I am changing the name as Sophia, then changing the gender as F in the component property. I am saving the file. After the page reload, we can see the name displayed as Sophia and the female radio button now selected. Pause the video here to include all the two-way data binding for name, salary, gender, and check if it works for both male and female values, then proceed ahead. Let me summarize whatever we have done so far. We defined an array of employee objects in employee.ts. Using this array, we displayed the employee list in employee list component. Using routerLink, we were able to dynamically construct the router URL passing the employee ID to the edit employee component. We were able to populate the form field values based on the hard-coded data in employee property of edit employee component. This is what we have implemented so far. Now let me summarize how we are going to dynamically display the employee data in edit employee component. The coding needs to be done in ng-onInit function of edit employee component. Angular executes the ng-onInit function before the display of a component. Hence, this is where we need to include the logic to display the employee data dynamically. As a first step, we need to get the ID from the router path. Next, we need to navigate through the employees array items and find the matching entry. Then the final step is to assign the matching employee object to the employee property in edit employee component, which will automatically populate the form field values as we have already implemented two-way data binding. Hope this clarifies the steps to dynamically display the employee data. Let us look into the first step on how to get the employee ID. Whenever user clicks on a root, Angular internally creates an object called activated root. We can get the root parameter value using this object. Now we will see how to get access to this object in the constructor of edit-employee.component.ts. In the constructor parameter, I am including private followed by constructor parameter name as root of data type activated root. I am selecting activated root from the drop-down so that imports are automatically included. We can see activated root comes from the router module. Inclusion of activated root in the constructor makes it possible to access activated root within the component. In ng onInit function, let me include the code to get the employee ID based on the activated route. I am typing this dot followed by route. Route here represents the activated route that we have included in the constructor. Typing dot after route and then selecting snapshot, which represents the most recent route. Typing dot after snapshot and then selecting params, which contains all the parameters and its values sent in the route. The value for ID can be obtained by providing square brackets after the params and then including ID within quotes. Let me enclose this within a console log so that we can know if we have received the data or not. Let me save the file. After the page reload, let me click on employee navigation link on the top. Then I am clicking the second edit link. The ID of the second link is 2. Let us check in the console of the browser if 2 is displayed. After opening the console, we can see 2 printed. Now let me go back to employee list page and select the third link. We can see 3 displayed now. This means that we are able to successfully get the router parameter value that is passed from employee list component. Pause the video here, include the activated route in the constructor, then include this line in ng onInit function, then check if the appropriate employee ID is displayed in the console log. Once completed, proceed ahead. Now we will look into the second and third step to dynamically display the employee details. We need to iterate through the employees array, find the matching entry and assign it to the component employee property. Let me demonstrate how to implement this in the code. We know that this function call gets the employee ID from the root parameter. I am removing the console log and assigning the result into a local variable named ID. Based on this ID, the matching entry in employees array needs to be found. So in the next line, let me first get the reference of employees array. I am typing emp and then selecting employees from the drop-down so that the array defined in employee.ts can be imported. Now we have got the reference of employees array object. In this object, I am going to call the find function. This is a built-in function available in JavaScript to get a matching entry from an array. For this function, an arrow function needs to be passed as input parameter. I'm going to name the arrow function parameter as item, then including equal to and greater than symbol to represent that the following code is an arrow function body. In the body of the arrow function, we need to include the condition to find the specific employee object. The condition will be item.id followed by double equals and then id. Here item represents the employee object from the array which is passed as parameter to this arrow function. Using .id, we are getting the value of id property from the employee object. The id after double equals refers to the local variable defined above which contains the employee id received from the employee list component as root parameter. This arrow function will return the matching employee object based on the id. Now we have completed the second step, which is to search and find the matching employee object from employees array. The third step is to assign the found object to component employee property. In the beginning of this line, I am including this.employee followed by assignment operator. This will assign the returned employee object to the component property. But this results in a compilation error from TypeScript. To understand the error message, let me hover the mouse over the red underline. It shows that employee or undefined is not assignable to employee. We know that the component property this.employee is of type employee. Let me note down the data type as a comment in the next line. Let us find the data type returned by the find function. Hovering over find function will show its documentation. Over here it shows the return type of the find function. We can see the return data type is employee or undefined. The pipe symbol here represents OR, and this syntax is specific to TypeScript. In the comment below, let me note down the data type for find as employee or undefined. We can see the mismatch in the data type returned by find function and the data type of employee component property, hence it is resulting in compilation error. To overcome this, let me remove the assignment to component employee property and assign it to a local variable named employee without any data type. Since no data type is defined for employee local variable, any data type can be assigned, hence resolving the compilation error. But still, we are not able to assign the found employee object to component employee property. In the next line, I am checking if the employee is not undefined. This means that a matching object is found by the find function. Within the if block, I am assigning the component employee property from the local employee variable. Using this alternative approach, we are able to assign the component employee property with the found employee object. With this coding, it should make this example work as expected. But before testing the code, let me do some cleanup activity. The employee property was earlier hard-coded with some sample data. This is no longer required, hence it can be cleared. But after clearing it, it results in a compilation error because no value is assigned to the employee property and it will be undefined. We can overcome this by including an exclamation character after the employee property name. Now we are done with all the coding. Let us test if it works as expected. I am saving the file. After the page reload, let me go to the employee list page and click on the edit link for John. We can see John's details displayed in the form fields. Going back to employee list page and clicking on the edit link for Emma, we can see Emma's details displayed. As we can see, the example is working as expected. Let me summarize the changes to be done. In edit-employee.component.ts, include exclamation after the employee property and remove the sample data we defined earlier. In the first line of ng-oninit, remove the console log and assign the returned employee ID to a local variable. Include these lines in ng-oninit function to find the employee object and assign it to the component property. Don't forget to include the import for employees array. Pause the video here, implement the changes mentioned, save and check if it works as expected, then proceed ahead. Now that we have successfully implemented the example, let me summarize the key takeaways that we have learned about root parameter. Roots in app-routing.module.ts can be defined with parameter using colon and user-defined parameter name. This makes it possible for the assigned component to receive data from another component. It is also possible to define multiple parameters in the same root by including another slash and another parameter name. To create a link with root parameter, we used routerLink directive with property binding, passing an array with the root path and parameter value. More parameter values can be included in the array by including a comma and then passing the value. The array makes it possible to dynamically pass any number of parameter values. Next, we saw how we can read the parameter value that is passed from one component to another. We used the activated root object. From this object, we accessed snapshot. From snapshot, we accessed params object for which we can provide the parameter name and get the value. The root parameter feature plays a crucial role in moderately complex application to pass data between components. Even though this video is longer, I hope this video helped to understand about route parameter and the scenario where it can be applied. With this, we are concluding the example for route parameter, and we are also concluding the topics on routing. Hope the routing related videos helped you to get started with routing in Angular and paves the way to learn the advanced topics in routing.